What does corruption and the COVID-19 pandemic have in common? Both have severe effects on the nation's economy. I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah, and this is Money Matters. Welcome and thanks for joining us on TV3's flagship business program, Money Matters. We are joined by Malaysian Association of Certified Fraud Examiners President, Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar. Datuk Seri, welcome to Money Matters.
Thank you.
Can I start off by asking you that the Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Datuk Seri Mustafa Mohamad, has said that a lack of integrity in institutions impacts economic growth. So when the nation is facing tough economic and, of course, now health challenges as well, how can the country instill good governance and integrity?
There are three factors here. Number one is a strong, sincere political will from the political leader. This is very important. And, of course, the political leader have to show good example and make sure that there is no corruption, or at least there is some effort in prevention corruption. Because corruption, according to one study, is the thief of economic and social development, and it is what we call is a big problem in this country. Yeah, that is one of the factor. And number two, of course, the effectiveness of the criminal administration or criminal justice system. So that include, of course, the law enforcement agency, such as the anti-corruption MACC. They should be independent, and of course, when conduct investigation, it should be without fear and favour. And number two, the Attorney General, which is very important because the appointment of these two, right, the MACC chief and also the Attorney General, were appointed by the Prime Minister, by Agong, but of course with the recommendation of Prime Minister. So the problem here, because they can sack these two, what we call chief anytime. So this is a big problem in our country. That's why I think many experts are thinking that they have to review on this area. And of course, the court cases also. The final point will be the support from the public. I think we have a lack of support from public. So public is not interested in fighting corruption, but most of the public are the givers, and also private sectors. They are givers to government servants. So this is a big problem. And the other one is the other important point will be the attitude and the mindset of our people. That, you know, some of us, even there are some leaders or any government officers, senior government officers who are involved in corruption or are arrested by the MACC or charged, but they still respect them. So this kind of mindset, I think we have to change in order to improve the situation and reduce corruption in this country.
Right, but why do you think the public is not supportive of the measures that you talked about just now?
There are so many factors. Number one, they have no confidence with the law enforcement agency. And the problem with our public, they consider the politician as the welfare officer. So every time, you know, when, example, you are from Kelantan, you know, whenever you want to come over to Kuala Lumpur, they used to ask money, you know, repair your motorbike and so on. So these are the big problem from in respect of the public. And of course, number two, I think we do not reach the standard yet that you know, to fight corruption totally, I think, in this country.
Right.
So normally, based on fraud theory, there are three factors here. It is called opportunity. Of course, being a politician or senior government officer, you have opportunity, you know, holding big posts, special posts in the ministry, or you have power, you know, to give approve contract and so on.
So the interesting thing that you've mentioned as well, I just want to bring this up to you, is that the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, His Majesty the King, has asked the government to act on the recent Auditor General's report on the 620 million losses. So what are your recommendations on how government departments and agencies can comply with basically financial management procedures to curb leakages?
To be frank to you, this is the first time where Agong, Yang di-Pertuan Agong himself, raised this issue. So this must be serious. And number two, of course, it is a failure of the most of organisation, especially public sector, because they are involved in corruption. Therefore, I think one of the main important factor will be, of course, the government. In fact, the Minister of Finance has already added 100 million ringgit to the audit department. But this is one of the good moves, because you cannot penalize law enforcement agencies such as MACC or audit department. So these agencies are very important. So budget are very important for them, because according to Association of Certified Fraud Examiner, a report to Nation 2020, right, 5% of any organisation will be lost because of fraud and leakage. So therefore, by strengthening the the audit department, of course you can reduce at least 5%, or you can reduce to 3%. So this is very important. And the other point is the monitoring. You know, we have lack of monitoring by the superior, because they do not really monitor the staff. And also the other point, which is very important, they themselves are involved in corruption. You know, they sometimes the senior officer, the KSU, and the Ketua Pengarah, sometimes they are involved in corruption together with politicians. So these are the main problem, because, as I mentioned earlier, rationalization, meaning to say that once you get involved in corruption, therefore your subordinate, your lower officer will follow you. So these are some important points.
Yes,
and
but
of course,
again, it goes to the investigation of the people that are accusing them for that. So having said that, procurement fraud, which appears to be a goldmine for making easy money, especially relating to expenditure in the public sector. So what are the challenges that the nation is facing to prevent this kind of fraud?
This is very important sector, because according to study by MACC, at least 43% of the complaint related to procurement fraud. And 50% of the arrests and also complaint by the MACC related to senior officers who are involved in corruption in procurement sector. So therefore, I think it's very important for the government and also the senior officer to make sure that they have to try to reduce corruption in this sector. Because according to one study by the World Bank, we are losing at least 20 to 30% because of procurement fraud in public sector. And this was supported by the former Auditor General, Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar. He also stated that at least we were losing about 20-30% because of fraud and corruption. So this is very important for us to prevent. And of course, the other point that I would like to highlight here, the MOF should have the flying squad, meaning to say that at least before any project are completed, you have to conduct a spot check, right, to see whether it is progress or not. Or number two, at least before you pay, right? So at least you have to visit the place whether the project are completed. Right. These are the things that we are losing a lot of money, because no monitoring, and we simply pay to the contractor. And the other point that I would like to highlight here will be the agreement itself, right? So normally the agreement should be pro the government, should be for the benefit of the national interest, right, but not for beneficial of the company. Yes. So because of the corrupt practice by the senior officer, therefore I think they cooperate each other to get involved in corrupt practices.
Datuk Seri, hold that thought. We will be back with you just after this. So we're taking a short break now. So in the meantime, let us know your thoughts on the discussion on Twitter, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, and you're still with us on Money Matters as we speak with Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar, the President of the Malaysian Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Now, Datuk Seri, the United Nations Development Programme has reported that the procurement of medical supplies during COVID is one that is most open to fraud. So why do you think is this the case? Is it because of the emergency mechanisms in place and countries that need the vaccines urgently?
Yeah, that are a few of the reasons. The other reason will be some politicians, they are interested to make money, easy money out of this. Because as I stated earlier, any contract, according to World Bank, you'll be losing between 20 to 30%. So this is a big budget. And number two, of course, you can see that the stimulus packages that we had is $1 billion, right? So if you are not careful, if we do not have strong internal control policy and also prevent leakage, of course, we'll be losing a lot. And in Malaysia, it's quite famous, right? When you order a motorcycle, the cost will be the cost of the car, but you receive a bicycle. So this is the main problem that we really face in the country, because corruption is rampant. Especially, you see the budget for the 12th Malaysian plan, right? For development alone, they have allocated more or less 400 billion. So if you are losing, if you are not careful, if you are not strengthen our internal control policy, you will be losing 20-30% out of that. So this is a lot of money. Right. So some are asking, why should we spend so much money? Why should we allocate too much money on development projects, since we are facing problem? The public the rakyat are facing problem. The rakyat are poor and so on. Why not we concentrate on other area that can give more beneficial to the public? That's why people the experts are afraid that they have some agenda to get to get involved in corruption, because this is the best way to get money from corrupt practices through procurement fraud.
Right. So now, according to MACC's records, every year almost half of the total arrests it made involve civil servants. So, of course, this has been an issue for decades, like you mentioned as well. So what approach can be taken to reduce this? Are we not investigating properly or coming up with some sort of program to make sure that the civil servants are aware that this is basically fraud? Yeah.
Number one, as I mentioned earlier, there must be political will, especially among the top government officials. They have to take care of their subordinate. And number two, of course, supervision. In order, before you supervise your own officer, you have to be whiter than white. The main problem with us now, as a big bosses, you yourself are involved in corruption. Therefore, I think it's quite difficult to control them. And number two, of course, we can see that even the institution like the Institute of Integrity in Malaysia, right? They might as well should concentrate more on government servant, because the arrest is quite high, It's about 44% government servant. So, but the problem, I think they are concentrating more on private sector. I think it's high time for them to concentrate on government servant. And the other point that I would like to highlight here will be that, of course, the government should introduce misconduct of public service. So this is very important, because like Section 17A, Big A, for the private sector, where any corruption taking place by your staff and so on, the bosses, the company will be responsible. So the misconduct of public services is very important, because it is being practiced in Hong Kong. So meaning to say that if you intentionally cause leakage and so on, you can be charged, because this is a criminal case. So this is a very important section that should be inserted in the MACC Act in order to reduce corruption.
So now you said about Hong Kong having that. Now, like the US, should we create a specialized oversight council or committee to achieve greater transparency? Because like I mentioned, in the US, which has an endemic response accountability committee to oversee the spending, would that help?
Yeah, that will help temporarily, but we should have a flying squad, as I mentioned earlier, right? Meaning to say that if the project is more than 100, 200 or 1 billion, so at least you have to, if you smell something, there is a red flag. Therefore, I think it's good for you to investigate. So at least if there is some leakage there, you can stop. And number two, if at least you can ratify the witnesses. If not, if you cannot ratify, therefore you can give the new contract. So this is very important because in US, even the audit department, right, they have the power to intercept and also to go and check and stop. But in Malaysia, I'm not sure. But I used to ask the former Auditor General. He said there is a clause there. I'm not sure whether why don't they do this, right? Because because they do not do through midway. But what they did is that they only wait until all the projects are completed, therefore they go and audit. It's quite late already because you are losing money. So therefore I think it's quite high time for us to have this flying squad or task force, you know, to make sure that we have to investigate if there is some red flag, therefore to reduce corruption.
Right. But you have mentioned about the task force and whatever, but anti-corruption initiatives taken by our country, Malaysia, that is the National Anti-Corruption Plan, etc., how successful, how effective do you think this is?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive issue, but I think it is only good on paper. So I think many of the government departments are not following the directive instruction. They are not interested, and of course, again, as I mentioned earlier, because based on arrest by MACC, I think the senior government officer also are corrupted. So this is the main problem, and of course. The most important area here that we have to highlight is that we must have political will among the politician, the Prime Minister, and also the KSU to make sure that we really reduce corruption in all government departments, because corruption is rampant. It is not only confirmed by the MACC, the present MACC chief, but the previous MACC chief, that corruption is rampant, and some say it is already pandemic.
Right.
So this is very important for us to make sure, because corruption is very bad for the country, because it will not only prevent investors, you know,
from coming in. Yeah, Datuk Seri, just hold that thought. We've just got to go for our final break right now. Do stay tuned for more on the discussion, and remember to share your thoughts with us on Twitter, so don't go anywhere. Thank you for staying with us on Money Matters. Now, Datuk Seri, the CPI 2020, or the Corruption Perception Index, where do we stand right now? And also the Global Corruption Barometer, GCB 2020, and of course the arrest statistics by the MACC 2015 to 2020 in terms of arrest trends. Where are we now on this?
Actually, we are quite bad, because in fact the CPI 2020, right, we fell, no, from 51 per 180 countries, we fell to 57. So our number is 57 per 180 countries. So this is very bad. And number two, of course, when you speak regarding the GCB, yeah, So according to study, because for CPI, it is use secondary sources, from the expert, from the business expert. But there is another what you call survey. It is called GCB, General Corruption Barometer, which they survey not only people from kampung but also from the town. So 71% stated that corruption in the government public service is very bad. And number two, of course, when asked which institution is the most corrupted, it is a member of parliament, most corrupted. Number two is the police officer, police department. So these are the two areas.
So it's interesting that you talk about basically members of parliament and people being involved in this. So political corruption. As for the Political Funding Act, how can one differentiate between political funds and corruption?
Yeah, but the most important point here will be there is no law on political corruption. But of course, MACC can differentiate between political corruption and corruption because we have what we call enough law, especially Section 16, 17, and also plus the section under the what we call the Election Offence Act, right, 1954. I think there is enough law for them to what we call investigate and of course charge them in court. Because it is quite clear, this law, I think we have more than enough law in this country. Therefore, I think the most important now is to enforce the law.
Right. So looking at the laws, you already mentioned the Election Offences Act 1954. So again, do we have enough laws to combat corruption? Like we've got the MACC Act 2009, the Whistleblower Protection Act. I think this is very important for people to come out and basically report on corruption. So what are your views on this?
Actually, if you look at the offence of Election Act 1954, right? So Section 8, Section 9, 10 cover. No? Section 8 is treating you cannot give food, drink. That one is an offence. Really. Number two will be influence the voter not to vote or to vote. So the other point, the other Section 10 will be corruption. But the penalty is more severe if you compare with the MACC Act. The penalty will be, number one, of course, you will be fined. Number two, imprisonment. And of course, you'll be removed from the chair of the seat if you win. And you cannot get involved in politics for 5 years. So the offence is very, very clear and very severe. And if you compare to MACC, of course, MACC Act is 10,000, which one higher 5 times. But normally, in the court, right? So normally, the judge will if you plead guilty, right? They give you only 1 day imprisonment, and you have to pay, and you pay the fine. But of course, white collar criminal are rich; they can pay the fine. But that's why I say, if you compare with the offence of the Election Act, right? So that is very important because I'm sure the politicians are quite scared, to lose the seat, and also you cannot get involved in politics for 5 years.
But again, it boils down again to enforcement, like you said just now. So moving on, Datuk Seri, you have always said that you are very against cartels, and you have spoken out against cartels very strongly, especially those in the illegal cigarette trade. And you have said we are #1 in the world for this. And we lose out like 5 billion ringgit a year in uncollected tax revenue, and that obviously affects the government as well. So how do we stem this? Because it would cross different industries like shipping and things like that.
Number one, again, strong political will. Number two, of course, I suggested that, Section 135 of the Custom Act, they should be what we call put in the schedule of the SOSMA. This will be powerful. Once you have SOSMA, therefore I think cartel are scared, to get involved in smuggling in, because right now it is quite difficult because the government has already imposed some kind of restriction that you cannot simply what we call import and store your cigarette in the free trade zone. But now the modus operandi have changed. So they are changing. They are taking. In fact, how they transport is that they they try to transport and of course using small boat from their main ship through this kampung area and also all the coastal area from Johor to Langkawi. So these are the things that they not only try to influence, but they win heart and mind of the kampung people. So many of these kampung people are helping them to smuggle goods into Malaysia because they pay them. In fact, to the mosque, they give donation to the mosque, to the community service and so on, so that influence. So this is very important for government agency to make sure that to counter this problem, because if not, I think corruption, especially smuggling illegal cigarette into the country, cannot be overcome, because we are losing 5 billion per year. That will be a lot of money.
Right. Datuk Seri, now the government has introduced many measures in terms of combating corruption. So what is the positives that you can take away from this?
I think it is quite good for the government. I heard that they are going to amend the MBCC Act and insert the misconduct of public service. I think that will help a lot. And number two, of course, they are going to look into the Election Offence Act. So at least give some power to the SPR, because right now I think SPR has no power, right, to execute the law. So that are some of the important. And of course, we are hoping that the National Anti-Corruption Plan, right, at least if they if the government sector, right, implement and of course follow instruction from the GICC, of course that will help a lot to reduce corruption. I think that should be no problem, because now the GICC and also the MBCC preventive section or division are working very hard, to make sure that corruption in the organization will be reduced. And of course they are also training the Chief Integrity Officer in all the GLC and government department to make sure that at least they look into this area, right, to reduce corruption in those organizations.
Right. Datuk Seri, thank you very much for being on Money Matters. It certainly has been an eye-opener with your very insightful views. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the program this week again. Thank you to Datuk Seri Akhbar Satar for joining us on Money Matters. To our viewers, do come back to the show next week, same day and same time, for more money insights that matter. With that, I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah. Stay safe.